If I just read out the theory part, it might look very confusing here. The reason is that it involves too many processes and phrases. If they're not being able to achieve, if they're not being able to come up with that success rate, that means we need to change the strategy. We need to change the baseline altogether. Globalization has actually created a kind of competition spirit where everybody feels that they can invade into the other country. Good morning and welcome to the first session, Chapter 9, Unit 2, second semester BCom in Sustainable Development, where we are going to talk about the strategy for sustainable development. It's very important here that we start understanding what are the available strategies for us to grow, for us to make sustainable development even more improvised. Why? Because whenever I talk about the sustainable development, at the end of the day, people will ask this question: what is that you have got to sustain yourself? What is that you have really thought upon in making this planet even more sustainable? So let's first try to understand what is the strategy. It's nothing but a coordinated set of participatory and continuously improving process of analysis, debate, capacity strengthening, planning, investment, which integrates all the objects as far as possible. So that's what exactly we are talking about in a sustainable goal. If I just read out the theory part, it might look very confusing here. The reason is that it involves too many processes and phrases. But in reality, let's try to understand the entire concept of sustainable development is all about understanding this very simple concept, integrating your capacity and sustaining for the future. Which means, are you future ready? Are you a kind of a person who has understood what exactly is needed for the future? What exactly we need to do for the survival? So with that philosophy, with that factor in mind, whenever I talk about this integration part, whenever I talk about the capacity planning and the factors put together, it is here we are trying to understand the possibility altogether. It's here we are trying to understand that somewhere down the lane we have to find a very suitable strategy that can make us sustain for a longer time period. Now, the effective strategy for sustainable development brings together the aspirations, capacities of government, civil society, private sector to create a vision for future and to work for a tactically and progressively towards it. So whenever I say that the approach and the development is needed, now when you look into the governmental aspect, they want to understand a process, a system, which can be tactical, which can be socially understandable, adjustable, and can be a beneficial act altogether. Now, when we understand this word called as capacities of the government, it is more about trying to understand the feasibility, how much a government can support, how much a government can take in forms of developing that strategy and making it accessible to all. Many a times we feel that the capacity of the government is very limited, but they just go ahead, promise people saying that they would be able to do n number of things. At the end of the day, when the government realizes that they are short of resources, they are not able to fulfill the promises, they draw a blank in the eyes of public. So that's why I would always say that the strategy has to be planned in such a way that you progress towards the future with confident steps, and you also understand what is essential, what is needed for the hour, so that you are able to take it forward. The next one, it identified, builds on what works, improves integration between approaches, provides a framework for making choices where integration is not possible. And that is very, very important here. Why? Because we need to understand the factor that whenever we are identifying, we need to identify what works. This word is very, very important for us. Strategy is not something that we try to talk about 10,000 feet above the ground or 50,000 feet above the ground. Strategy is something that is applicable to you and me at the current hour. That's the need of the hour. That should be something which is easy for us, understandable, effective, and that should be in such a way that everybody is able to try and test it practically. Unless and until we are doing it, it is not going to provide us a framework, or we would be rather just thinking about ourselves that this entire strategy is remaining where it is. So we need to provide a framework, we need to build a system, we need to build an entire ideology in such a way that this strategy actually integrates all the practices, it takes forward all the necessary resources and creates a sustainable environment in the long run. Followed by the external partners who are a support to this strategy. Now, the development aspect of a strategy cannot happen in silos. So, always we need to understand that to develop a strategy, you need partners, you need cooperation, and these cooperative agencies have offered financial and technical support to the strategic planning approach, such as the national conservation strategies, the poverty reduction strategies, and this support has been provided to the opportunities for country, to the stakeholders to explore the sustainable development options. So now what is happening is that though the external agencies, let's talk about IMF or World Bank or OECD, all these people have tried to understand this very simple factor that this is the right time where we need to provide some sort of sustainable energy support to the people here and make sure that these options are given to the country in terms of exercising it and try to bring it forward as a sustainable strategy. Most of the countries feel here that this strategy that has been developed has been going in such a way that this opportunity is not even being taken forward in the right manner. So what is very much needed here is that the government should provide such sort of support to the country where the options are very, very clear and they are flexible in nature. Followed by, when you talk about this bilateral and multilateral development agencies, we have been hearing about it through the WTO or probably through the IMF, the World Economic Forum, and other bilateral arrangements that are being done. They are heavily influenced by this strategy process. They are just carried away, or rather I would like to say upon this word, they are very much concerned about the strategic process that goes through the system, its timing and its outcome. So they are highly concentrated on the results and they want to know that how the country will be able to come out with a successful strategy, give them the best option, the best opinion in the long run, and then the one which they are supporting with another strategy. So what is the link between one particular strategy and the other in the long run? The next one is the monitoring practice. Now, you need to see that any strategy that is going to be implemented has to be monitored. You cannot just leave the strategy in the air and say that, yes, it's going to be done by its own. So sometime down the lane, one has to think very, very clearly and carefully, stating this factor that, yes, this strategy has to be implemented, it has to be monitored, it has to be found out whether they are doing it in the right way, in the right direction or not. So somewhere down the lane, I would always feel that the monitoring is one of the core competent part of a strategic development progress. It needs to cover all the processes as far as possible, such as the quality, the coverage of participation, the information, outcomes, and the changing baseline. When I use the word changing baseline, it's about the benchmark. It's about the factors that we are talking about in terms of development. So this has to be covered altogether. Secondly, monitoring is not a separate exercise. So I will never say that monitoring is something out of the blue or out of the box altogether. On the contrary, the process outcome indicators need to be considered on a regular basis. So when we are going to talk about this factor, how the strategy has been formed, how it has been taken care of, we also need to understand that the outcome indicators will be considered on a regular basis. That means the results would be monitored, evaluated by the stakeholders, trying to understand whether they have been able to achieve what has been told. If they're not being able to achieve, if they're not being able to come up with that success rate, that means we need to change the strategy, we need to change the baseline altogether. Followed by the challenges to the sustainable development. What are the challenges that we are seeing? The development progress over the past 30 years has been an unprecedented factor altogether, which means the life expectancy in the developing countries has risen more than 20 years. Infant mortality rates have also been halved, and the primary school enrollments have also doubled. Now, this is a very good news for all of us. Why? Because once upon a time when we were talking about the mortality rates at around 56 and 60, today most of the countries have a mortality rate somewhere around 76 to 80, and the literacy percentage across the globe has crossed more than 85%. So that means you would be able to see that there are many people and countries who have made a successful progress altogether in terms of understanding the human indicators, and they are moving forward. But at the same time, the food production and consumption has also increased 20% faster than what it was the population, and the pace of improvements in income level as well as the health and education has also exceeded that of the industrialized country. So somewhere down the lane, we are able to understand this factor very clearly that yes, we have been developing ourselves, we have been trying to build a system, a capacity to such a great level that it is trying to make us move forward, it is trying to make us understand where we are exactly heading to. But then at the end of the day, I really want to focus upon these factors very clearly. Why? Because somewhere you are able to see the connection here. One side, the human race for exceeding himself in terms of expectations have gone skyrocketing. The other side, when we talk about food production and consumption, which is the bare minimum, bare necessity for a human to survive on this planet, has also started ticking the alarm clock. The bells have been rung so wide and loud that we are not in a position to overcome ourselves. We are not ready to face that acute crisis. Many places across the globe, you might be seeing food shortage, water shortage, and so many other problems that have been coming across. So what we are feeling at the end of the day is that this needs to be controlled. This needs to be brought back in place altogether. Followed by the decentralization and globalization. These are two major trends that we have been talking about, which can reinforce and contradict each other. Now look at those words. One side, I'm talking about a concentration. I'm trying to say that yes, this is what is needed for the planet, but at the same time, this is going to be a challenge to the planet also. So I'm trying to put in both the words here, reinforce and contradiction altogether. Now, are they relevant in respect altogether? The answer is yes. While it increasingly recognizes that most social and environmental issues most effectively are dealt with the centralized level, many are linked to the globalization and they require the global rules of governance system. Though they are linked, though they are understandable, though they are built over a particular system, we know that how things are happening. We also know how things have been going forward, where it is going, how it is going. Every single aspect we are understanding, there's no doubt about it. But the other side, we find it that this link to the globalization is also causing a harm to the planet, because we are using the resources at that high rate. We are depleting the resources at that high rate. Probably we might not be able to regenerate it. So one side, when we are talking about the globalization, the other side, we are also talking about the environmental issues. Followed by the decentralization. Now, decentralization can foster development policies and strategies suited for the local economic and the environmental factor. So whenever we talk about the social economic factor, what we are trying to understand is that it's about promotion, the good governance structure which are responsible for the citizens' demands, that allow the downsizing and streamlining of central government institutions. So somewhere down the lane, we don't want more of government, we want more of governance altogether. So what we want to see here is that we want to see that the world has understood the essence of becoming independent day by day. We do not want to be a part of a dependent system where I go back to the government every day asking for something or the other. We rather want to have a system where people are independent enough to make their choices, to make the process even more enabled by themselves, so that I can downsize, I can streamline the process to such an extent that I'm able to think myself, I'm able to activate myself, I'm able to work by myself. Now, when you look into smaller countries like Finland, when you look into places like Norway, Denmark, all these countries have been able to make a rapid progress in the human indicators. Why? Because they have been able to understand that the intellectual part of thinking is activated. They have understood that it's not the government every time has to step into your life. Rather, you can make your life even more interesting by following certain ethics and principles, and you can include everybody as a part of the society to be a part of the bigger journey called as the human race. Followed by the globalization. Now, the process of globalization has been driven by factors such as trade liberalization or increasing foreign investment, where we talk about people who are trying to improve on the technology, create a better communication, a rapid technology enhancement and innovation, and also the spread for economic reform programs and other factors. Now, the globalization is actually a race trying to conquer every part of the world, trying to conquer every nation, telling them that this is the right opportunity that you need to seize in terms of growing up. Globalization has actually created a kind of competition spirit where everybody feels that they can invade into the other country, where they can just try to spread their wings as far as possible and try to make this entire globe as a single united place where one country wants to dominate over the other country. And thanks to the globalization part, you would be able to see that the rapid increase in technology and innovation, which has gone to an extent beyond human thought, and we are slowly degrading the entire environment. The other side is that a guiding vision that we need to tackle the challenges. The 1987 Brundtland Report defined sustainable development, which is able to meet the needs of present without compromising the future generation. At the heart of this concept, keeping this as a central concept belief, we believe that the long-term social economic development objectives should be complementary and they should be interdependent in the development process. So that is what we are interested upon. That is what we are really needing at this point of time, because we want to see that at any given point of time, this is taken care of. This is what we are really worried about. Followed by why we need a strategic approach to the sustainable development. This is possible by achieving sustainable development will require a deep structural changes and the new ways of working all the areas of economic, social, and that of political life. This will include promoting of poor economic reforms. We want that to happen. We want the poor people to have a better life, standards of life, living together, better economic growth, and reforming the physical policies that we are talking about. Now, this reforming of physical policies is needed because that will negatively affect the life of people and also promote an environmental damage. So we want all those fiscal policies which are affecting the environment to be stopped and try to promote a policy which is eco-friendly. With this, I come to the end of today's session. I hope and believe that all the factors that we have discussed through this presentation would be of a great help to you, both in terms of theory as well as in the practical walk of life. In the upcoming sessions, we are going to talk about the environmental accounting measures, which is going to be a very interesting topic. But until then, stay tuned, stay enlightened, and be blessed forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.